Good morning, Grade 7, and welcome to WorksheetCloud, Grade 7 Natural Sciences. If you have a question during the lesson, send an email with your question to grade7@worksheetcloud.com. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mrs. Hall, and today's lesson is on the characteristics and classification of living organisms. I really hope that you leave today's lesson with some new insight and knowledge on how to classify living organisms. So what are we learning today, Grade 7s? We're going to do a basic recap on the 7 life processes quickly, just to make sure you know what something living is. We're going to look at classification, and in doing so, we're going to look at Carl Linnaeus. We're going to look at the 5 kingdoms, and by the end of this lesson today, you will be able to define and describe the binomial system of naming species, as well as looking at different examples that I show you. So, as you all know, biology is the study of living organisms. How do we decide if something is living or non-living? Now remember, living things are biotic factors, non-living are abiotic factors. So what is life, Grade 7? Well, in my last lesson, we spoke about the life processes. Who can remember what they are? So if something is alive, it will carry out all of the 7 life processes. So movements, respiration, sensitivity, nutrition, excretion, and reproduction, as well as growth. Mrs. Nerg. Over millions of years, each species living today has changed and adapted to live in a specific type of environment in order to ensure the survival of that species. Biodiversity is a term used to describe the great variety of living organisms on Earth, as well as their varied habitats. There are just so many types of different organisms. How can we make sense of all of the organisms on Earth? We need some way to group them, and this, Grade 7, is called classifying. So, classification makes the identification of living organisms easier. Organisms are sorted into groups according to features that they have in common. Grouping has been a common activity in humans for thousands of years as we make sense of the world around us. Just think about the groupings of you in primary school right now. You go from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3, 4, 5, 6, and eventually to 7, and then you go into high school. Okay, so you are also classified according to your ages. Now, if we had to look at Aristotle's classification system, we would learn that he was a Greek philosopher and thinker who lived about 2,400 years ago. Aristotle came up with the following grouping system that was used for almost 2,000 years after his death. He divided all organisms into either animals or plants. Now, he then divided those animals into those with blood and those without blood. Lastly, animals were divided into 3 groups based on their method of movement. Were they walkers, were they flyers, or were they swimmers? Along then came Carl Linnaeus. Now, as more and more animals, plants, and microorganisms were discovered, scientists started questioning Aristotle's classification system. It was not working as well as everyone had believed it would. Thank goodness for Carl Linnaeus. In the 1700s, he developed the classification system that classified organisms according to their similarities, functions, and relationships with other organisms. And that is the classification system that we use today. Today, with the use of modern microscopes and genetics, we can classify living organisms very accurately. In this way, we are able to classify living organisms according to their shared characteristics. Scientists estimate that up to 30 million species of organisms exist on Earth. If they use systems to classify these organisms, they can see patterns in nature and can see how organisms relate to each other. The science of classifying living things is called taxonomy. Now, all living organisms can be divided into 5 kingdoms. We have the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and these are the kingdoms that we look at in great detail in grade 7. We also have the kingdom of fungi, protists, and bacteria. They are also known as monoera, and here you can see the 5 kingdoms: the animals, the plants, the fungi, the bacteria, and the protists. Now, if I look over here and we look at the biodiversity on Earth, you can see that each of the kingdoms is very large and contains many different kinds of organisms. All the organisms belonging to a kingdom share the defining characteristics of the kingdom. So over here we have the animal kingdom, and if you look on this pie chart, you can see quite clearly they're definitely the largest kingdom, followed by plants, protists, fungi, and then a very small portion of organisms are bacteria. We then move on to the 7-level classification system. Now, Carl Linnaeus, who we spoke about earlier, was a Swedish naturalist who began the enormous task of classifying all living things. He used 7 groups or taxonomic levels to classify all living organisms. The 5 kingdoms are the broadest categories, with each subsequent category becoming more specific. Now, each kingdom is divided into smaller groups or divisions called phyla. These are organisms with similar traits or characteristics, and they all occupy a similar phylum. In each phylum, smaller divisions called classes are found, and each class is further divided into orders, families, genera, and then species. Now, be very careful to use these words correctly, grade 7s. One phylum, many phyla. Similarly, one genus, many genera. Now, over here we have the 7-level classification system. Kingdom, very general, contains many organisms, moving down the 7 levels to very specifically the species, which are closely related organisms. So we have our kingdom, into our phylum, into our class, into our order, into the family, into the genus, and then the species. And it's going to make a lot more sense to you as we progress today. To help us remember the 7-level classification system, you can form your own mnemonic. Now, a good way to remember this is to take the first letters over here and make a little rhyme and make it funny so that you remember. So if we want to remember the 7-level system, we want to remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. My little rhyme or mnemonic would be King Philip came over for green soup. And if I remember king, I will think of kingdom, Philip, phylum, came, look at C, class, O, order, F, family, G, genus, S, soup. So I hope that makes sense to you, and it's an easy way for you to remember the 7 levels of classification. Now, Carl Linnaeus designed a special naming system called the binomial nomenclature to name all organisms. All organisms are therefore given 2, because bi means 2 words, in their name. The first part of the name refers to the genus that the organism belongs to. This is always written with a capital letter. The second part of the name refers to the species within the genus. And if you are typing, you will put both these names in italics. But if you are doing a handwritten piece, you underline it. This shows that you are identifying the organism by its scientific name. And why do we follow this binomial nomenclature way to name all organisms? Because it is globally accepted all over the world. So it gives the animals their scientific names. Now, the basic unit of classification is the species. A species, as you know, is a group of organisms that can breed together to produce fertile offspring. Let's take a close look at naming species. So in the binomial system, organisms are identified by two names, the genus and the species. The genus always has a capital letter. Let's take a look at our examples today. Canis lupus. That Canis would be the genus and lupus would be the species, the wolf. And then Panthera leo. Panthera would be the genus, Leo would be the species, the lion. Now, how does this work in the classification system? Well, as you know, Canis is the Latin word meaning dog. So you think of a canine, okay? And under this genus, he listed the dog-like carnivores, which are a specific species, including domestic dogs, wolves, and jackals. So if I had to look at the 7 levels of classification now, the kingdom that Canis lupus would belong to would be Animalia, which is all the animals. The phylum would be Chordata, which is animals with a backbone. Those are our vertebrates, which you all already know what a vertebrate and an invertebrate is. And as we delve deeper into the animal kingdom in grade 7 science, we learn so much more. So the phylum is Chordata, which means animals with a backbone. The class is Mammalia, which are the mammals. The order is Carnivora, carnivorous animals. The family is Canidae, dog-like mammals. The genus is Canis, which are dogs. And the species is Lupus, in this case, grey wolves. So here we have the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, the species, the 7 levels of classification. Let's take a look at another example. The scientific name for lions is Panthera leo. The genus Panthera is of Greek origin and comprises big cat species such as tigers, lions, jaguars, and leopards that have the ability to roar. So Leo is the Latin word for lion. And let's take a look at the 7 levels. The full classification for a lion would be the kingdom, Animalia, the animals. The phylum is Chordata, again, vertebrate animals, animals with a backbone. The class is Mammalia, they are mammals. The order is Carnivora, meat eaters. The family is Felidae, or the cat family. The genus is Panthera, the great cats. And the species is Leo, for lion. Interesting how it all starts to make sense to you, isn't it? Okay, let's take a look at 2 other very easy examples. The scientific name for the African element is Loxodonta africana. So genus is Loxodonta, the species is Africana, the African elephant. Humans belong to the genus Homo and to the species Sapiens. So we are Homo sapiens. The scientific name, the Latin name, and the binomial nomenclature are different ways of saying the same thing. Sure, why do they want to confuse you, grade 7? I don't know. All of these are referring to the same system of naming species by its genus and the species name in Latin. Okay, so the scientific name, the Latin name, and the binomial nomenclature are all saying the same thing. Now that we have seen how to classify the organisms, let's take a look at the differences between the different kingdoms. So remember I spoke about the 5 kingdoms made up of all the living things, right? We've got the Monera, the bacteria, the Protists, the fungi, and plants and animals, which we look at in a lot of detail at grade 7 level. Before we start that, I just want to go over some basic terminology with you so that you understand what I'm talking about when I speak about the different characteristics of the different kingdoms. So when I talk about a cell, I'm talking about the basic membrane-bound unit that contains the fundamental molecules of life and of which all living things are composed. A cell is the smallest unit of life. When I speak about something being unicellular, I mean having or containing a single cell. Multicellular is something that is a complex organism made up of many cells. Humans are multicellular. While single-celled organisms can't usually be seen without a microscope, you can see most multicellular organisms with the naked eye. When I speak about a nucleus, it's usually a round part of most cells that is enclosed in a double membrane. It controls the activities of the cells and contains all the chromosomes. So over here, I just have a picture of a simple animal cell for you. Okay, basic, simple. You will learn all of this in grade 8. Your cytoplasm, your nucleus, your cell membrane, and your mitochondrion. Right, so like I said to you, let's look at the basic characteristics. So the 5 kingdoms, let's start with bacteria, also known as Monera. They are very small and single-celled with no nucleus. Okay, so now you know what I'm speaking about. Let's take a look at the Protists. They are single-celled with a nucleus, so that distinguishes them and makes them different. When we look at fungi, they have cell walls which contain chitin, also with a nucleus. Then we look at plants. They are multicellular organisms that can make their own food through photosynthesis. So the scientific word for that is they are autotrophs. And animals, they are also multicellular and they have to obtain their food from other organisms, and they are called heterotrophs. Right, let's take a little look at fungi. So most people will not eat bread covered in bread mold, which is fungi, but will eat a plate of fried mushrooms, truffles, and morels, which are also fungi. These are all examples of fungi, including yeast. Okay, so here we have morels. It's a type of edible mushroom, very distinctive for the appearance of their caps, which have pits and ridges that resemble a honeycomb. Don't think it tastes as delicious as honeycomb though. Here we have a truffle, and it is the fruiting body of a subterranean fungus. Okay, so that is the fungi kingdom. You also all know poisonous mushrooms. You can tell that they're poisonous generally by their color, and I'm sure all of you enjoy button mushrooms with your dinner. Fungi play a very important role in our biosphere since they break down dead organic material and return nutrients to the soil for plants to use. Some fungi cause diseases, while others, such as penicillin, which is an antibiotic, are very useful to us. Yeast is used in many of our products, such as making bread rise and fermenting wine and beer. Our protists and bacteria in these 2 kingdoms, we know they are microscopic, which means we cannot see them with the naked eye. However, we can see them if we look for them under a microscope. Here we have examples of bacteria. This is Escherichia coli bacteria, commonly found in the intestines of animals. Obviously, that is seen under a microscope. Here we have Staphylococcus. Oopsie, sorry, I need to go back there. Staphylococcus aureus, which are yellow cells, which often cause skin infections and pneumonia. Here we have Acetomyces bacteria, which cause diseases in the mouth. And interesting to see how they look under a microscope. Now let's take a quick look at the different protists. We have phytoplankton here from the Antarctic Sea, and here we have Asterionella formosa, which is also quite interesting to see under the microscope. Okay, and you learn about the protists and the bacteria in a lot of detail in grade 8 and 9. In grade 7, we are going to move on to the animal and plant kingdom, and it's quite an involved section. But before we move on to that next lesson, in our next video, I wanted to just tell you the difference between the animal and plant kingdom, so you have a basic understanding. So plants are generally rooted in one place and move by growing in shape and turning their leaves or petals towards the sun or a water source, right? Whereas animals can self-propel. So we're talking about movement here. They move themselves around through locomotion in order to find food, a mate, or shelter, or even to evade danger. Plants contain chlorophyll. They can photosynthesize to produce glucose, food from sunlight and carbon dioxide. They are autotrophs, whereas animals cannot produce their own food and have to eat plants or other animals to get nourishment. They are heterotrophs. Plants produce oxygen and take in carbon dioxide, whereas animals take in oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. Plants have a limited ability to sense, whereas animals have a well-developed ability to sense. Now, that's as far as we're going in the plant and animal kingdom today, grade 7s, because we've already run out of time, but I hope you've got a basic understanding of the differences in the 5 kingdoms, and you understand now how to classify organisms according to their characteristics. And just to end off for you, here's a library. And imagine this is how they classified a library. Books with dog-eared pages, books for high browns upstairs, brightly colored books this way, old books this way, books which fall over here, books that are easy to carry. Would you ever find your favorite books? Absolutely not. Would you find your authors? No. So that is why we use the Dewey classification system in our libraries at school, so we can easily classify into fiction, non-fiction, as well as into all the different authors. So now you understand why classification is so important. It keeps us organized and it groups everything. And over here, just to add to your day, can it get any more confusing? Yep. Another name for classification, just to remind you, is taxonomy. Grade 7s, I hope I haven't confused you too much and you've enjoyed this lesson and you've learned something new. Have a great day and see you soon. Take care, grade 7s. I just want to remind you that you can download a worksheet, and remember that this video was brought to you by WorksheetCloud.